my name is Jasmine Britton. I'm Carrie Britton's daughter, who's speaking to you today. My mom asked me to answer some questions that she wrote down. The first one is, what was elementary like for me? It was hard. I was very, very much behind when I first got into school. I was in 3rd grade. They put me in 3rd grade because of my age, and I didn't know my ABCs or how to count, my colors. I didn't know anything. Nothing. I did not know how to read. I didn't know how to write my own name. It was a lot of work to do in a short time. It didn't help that my fetal alcohol syndrome at the time was undiagnosed, and my ADHD at that time was undiagnosed, which my ADHD shortly, got diagnosed. How was it making friends? It was hard. I was a very bubbly, that's my cat, Flicka. Just ignore her. I was a very bubbly social butterfly, and I beforehand had no experience in socializing with people my own age, or people in general. And so it was hard to get social cues. It was, and the friends that I did make, they liked me for the most part. I don't talk to any of them now, except for one. But it was hard making friends. It was hard making friends throughout elementary, middle school, and high school. Because even though I calmed down with my hyperness and my bubbly, really loud socialness, my reputation had already been made that I was weird and awkward, and yeah. What did teachers do to help me? They were really, understanding of the situation of, me not having the education that everyone else in the class did. And so they did help me. Like, when I had questions, they answered it, or, especially me going down into the IEP room helped a lot, because they were able to focus on my needs specifically. And if I was in a classroom when I first started, it would have been really hard, because I would have been so behind that what they were doing now wouldn't have made sense to me. Especially with math, me not knowing my ABCs, or they were reading and I didn't even know, not my ABCs, I'm so sorry. With math, I did not know my numbers, and so I didn't, like, maybe 1 and 2, that's all I knew, but I didn't know anything else. And then reading, I didn't know my ABCs, or what letters, what sounds that the letters made, and so it wouldn't have been good. Okay. What didn't work? Nothing really didn't work. In 5th grade, it was a lot harder for me than the other grades, which sounds really weird that 3rd grade should have been the hardest one, because I was getting catched up, but it was just so, I caught on really, really fast. But 5th grade, the teacher, this is like 2 years into my education, and they had a brand new teacher in 5th grade that was my home teacher. And so it was hard, because she just wasn't able to explain things to me the way that was fit for me. I mean, in school, they don't teach you about ADHD and fetal alcohol syndrome for teachers. Like, it's not a common thing, and so she was not educated on how to help me, and that just 5th grade was very, very hard. What was middle school like? Middle school, it was It was hard at first, and then 7th and 8th grade came along. 6th grade particularly, it was really hard. I mean, I was able to like transfer really easily. It's just 5th grade did not prepare me very well for 6th grade at all. I was not prepared. I mean, I had the same friends, kind of. I had lost a couple in 5th grade. But mostly in middle school, I kept all my other friends and made a few friends. But school in particular, it was challenging because in 6th through 8th grade, like there was an actual reading class. It wasn't just like English and you learned about certain things and all that. But in middle school, there was an actual reading class. It was English, but it was also reading. We did a lot of reading in that class. And with me being behind, we had to do book reports and things like that, and we had to write down what we read that day, about what we read that day. And so with me not knowing very much English or reading in general, it was just very hard. And then 7th grade came along, and I remembered all the definitions of animanis and similes and hyperboles and all that kind of stuff. And so I was able to, do that a lot, and it helped. But my reading was still iffy. But I was doing way better. By 8th grade, I loved reading. Well, 7th grade I loved reading, but like I loved reading in 8th grade because I could read. I was reading chapter thick books in 8th grade. I mean, for crying out, I remember in 8th grade, I think I read the Twilight series. I mean, that was 5 years into my, education. I was able to read a book like that, and it was because of the teachers and me, I guess. My motivation and devotion to catch up with all my other classmates. And math was hard. I just didn't get math. They were into algebra and geometry, and it just didn't make sense to me at that time anyways. Because then in high school, it started clicking but throughout the whole rest of my, pretty much my whole education, English just really, English and reading I was super good at. But math was a struggle until later in high school. And it says, what worked in middle school, sorry, not in elementary. What worked in middle school? By middle school, I didn't have to go to any IEP rooms, which it was okay because I was caught up for the most part. I mean, yeah, I was a little bit behind but for the most part, I was there where I needed to be. What I liked the most is that there was an extra person. So there was the teacher and then the teacher's aide. And that teacher aide was able to help me more than the teacher, just due to the fact that the teacher had, obviously the teacher aide helped everyone in the class, but they were mostly for me and maybe one other person. I can't remember. Middle school was like a long time ago. But it helped that I still had that one person in there to help specifically me if I had any questions, if the teacher couldn't get to me. But it also helped that I felt like it was awkward that I had to go to a separate room because I was, sorry, my cat made noises, because I was behind, or it made me feel like I was out of place, or not out of place specifically, but not normal, I guess. And so that really helped that I didn't have to deal with that social anxiety about I'm too far behind or I'm dumb or, but that extra teacher aid really helped. Still by this time, I think it was 8th or 9th grade that my fetal alcohol syndrome got diagnosed, but my FAS was still undiagnosed by this time, and so there was something that was going on that wasn't explained for a certain reason, and so it was just, hard. And then what didn't work? I suppose there wasn't anything that didn't work. By the time middle school came around, everything with my IEP was settled. Everything was there what I needed. I was doing sports and I was doing great in school. Still math was still iffy. Science and history. History was really, really good at this time. I was really good at history too. I've kind of been good at history this whole time, I guess. Not particularly in elementary because there was really no history class, I guess. But in middle school and high school, history had always been, along with English, had always been something that I was really good at. I never really had to study too hard for history, if not at all for history, not particularly in high school for government and like geography, but like history was good. But no, there wasn't really anything that didn't work for me in middle school. What was it like in high school? High school was good. I was all caught up to where I needed to be. Yeah, there was a few things in ninth grade that was still iffy. But other than that, I was caught up. I was reading books when I didn't even have to for classes. Like, there was no class that required us to read, and I loved reading so much, and I was really good at it by then, that I was reading on my own. Still reading chapter books, really thick books. I still read books to this day. But friends, I had a very small group of friends, and I'm okay with that, because I'd rather have a small group of friends that are true friends than have a large group of friends that aren't actually my friends. But at this time, I still didn't have to go to an IEP room or anything like that. I did have a study hall that specifically was called the IEP room, with Miss Bear and with Miss Allen and Miss Coy, which have to be my favorite teachers. And like, I had Miss Bear with me from day one. Which was kind of funny because from third grade until senior year of high school, I had Miss Bear as one of my teachers, of my IEP teacher. For 2 years or 3 years or so in elementary, I had to go down in her room and everything like that. And then in middle school, she kind of just oversaw my IEP. There was no me having to go to an IEP room or anything like that. And then in high school, she was there in high school. I don't know if she was secretly obsessed with me or not, but I'm just kidding. Sorry, my humor's really bad. But she did a lot for me. I'm very thankful. I have to say, if it wasn't for her, I probably would not have the education, like as good of an education that I do now. She really believed in me, and she never gave up on me. And even when I almost gave up on myself in high school, she's like, "No, Jasmine, you got this. You're doing good," and blah 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 blah. And so, what didn't work? What didn't work was a certain teacher who constantly forgot that I had my IEP, like certain IEP needs that I needed in high school, that I just was not, like, my brain just wasn't wired that way to do those things. Specifically, I needed a word bank if there was like a fill-in-blank sentence, because I just was not good. Like, if you gave me the word, I could tell you the sentence, but if you gave me the sentence, for some odd reason, I had a really hard time putting that word in there. So I needed a word bank in classes that had those on the tests and everything. Paperwork, like homework, I could just look it up and whatnot. But tests were a different situation. I needed a word bank for that. and this one teacher constantly just forgot or just didn't care. I don't know which one, but that didn't work. What were my favorite teachers? Like I said, Miss Bear was Miss Coy and Miss Allen were probably one of my favorite ones. Another of my favorite ones was Miss Koch in ninth grade. I love her to death. Like, I loved her to death. She has to be my favorite English teacher ever. She was to the point, no diddly-doddling, and as long as you did your work and you did it good, you were on her good side. But if you messed around, no ma'am, you were not okay. But she helped me a lot, I do have to say. And she was a fun teacher once you got to know her and if you were on her good side. What is it now like an adult? It's good. Work is where it kind of like with my impulsiveness or my my impulsiveness is like probably the biggest thing. Like, I do before I think sometimes, and with my bosses, they don't understand that I don't do it on purpose. Obviously, it's not an excuse, but it does play a part. And then when I try to explain that I have fetal alcohol syndrome and it is a chemical, like, thing that's going on, they honestly don't care. They're like, oh, don't use it as an excuse, blah, 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 which I don't use an excuse. It's just like, I like to inform them, say, hey, if this ever happens, I have fetal alcohol syndrome. Sometimes I'm really super impulsive and I don't think before I do and whatnot. And then my forgetfulness is probably one of the biggest struggles at my job right now, is I keep forgetting certain things that I need to do on the daily. Because once it's during checkout, and one time you can do it, and then the next checkout you don't have to do it, and so it's just really hard to get into the habit of it, and I keep forgetting, and so that's like probably my biggest struggle. But other than that, adulthood sucks, but any adulthood sucks. It's just, jobs are probably the biggest struggle. And I've had a job since I was 14, but when I was 14, my mom was able to always be there to tell the boss and make them understand. By the time I was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, or not, but even before that with my first boss, at Slate Creek Grill, which was a restaurant, she was able to go to my kind of like my manager over me, and she was like explaining, like, this is Jasmine, you have to do, she's a good kid, but are these certain things that she, struggles with. And so all I have to say at the end of this, because I have no more questions to answer, is to be an advocate for your daughter or son, but also let them be the advocate of themselves too eventually, because you are not always going to be there by their sides. And teach them to be an independent person, because if they start being dependent on you and then you leave one day, they're gonna have it really hard. And teach them now at a young age, or even if they're older, not yet out of high school or whatnot. Teach them to advocate for themselves. Teach them to be responsible. Teach them, my mom made me get a job when I was 14, and I'm very glad for that, because I learned very quickly that money just does not grow on trees, and you have to work really hard. And sometimes when you work really hard and long hours, that money just, there's not a lot of money afterwards. But yeah. And I guess I just want to let teachers and principals and mothers and fathers and siblings know that, though, like I said, it's not an excuse. Don't use an excuse, but we don't mean to be bad if we are. Like, sometimes, yeah, you can tell that we do it on purpose, but accidents with us happen a lot. And with our impulsiveness, and if you get us mad, we're impulsive, and sometimes we say things, and most of the time we don't mean it. And it's not like we purposely do something bad. Well, some of us do, but particularly most of us probably don't do anything bad on purpose. But that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.